positive note, because I really do agree very much with what you're saying, but don't you feel that in addition to humility, just all of our life experiences, positive, negative, lead to true wisdom as opposed to, putting so much emphasis on this humility?
I wish I could agree with you, but I can't.
But you don't. Okay.
I wish I could. Because, you see, pop psychology is all about feeling good and looking good and making money and the positive and the positive and positive. But the reality is, again, I bring us back to reality. The reality is that positivism as a philosophy is simply untrue. You can be more positive than the actual situation warrants. And be out of sync with reality. I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm saying when you really get down to the nitty-gritty of where optimism and positivism, I'm bringing it to the ultimate. I'm bringing it to, or in a sense, I'm reducing it to the core elements of what that philosophy might get us to. I wish that we could, if we were so disposed to learn from our good times, why is it then when suffering and pain and hurt comes in our way that we curse God? I mean,
I guess what I was trying to say is that all of our experiences, like the good, like as well, in addition to the humility, all of our experiences.
My experience is that we learn more from pain than we do from the good times. And my tendency is to put God on a shelf when things are going really good. That's just my tendency. I tend to kind of whistle and get by with in my own strength, and I don't learn nearly as much about Him, about God, about giving, about loving through my good times as I do through my bad. I could say that now with a lot more assurance, that pain has taught me much more about truth in the good times. But we do learn from our good times, don't we? We do learn.
I think that some of my negative or humiliating experiences have led me to appreciate some of the positive experiences and sort of shed a light that each and every experience, I really do agree very much with this whole circle concept. I just feel that from my point of view, there's the element of, sort of distinguishing between humility and I sort of feel that the positive, all of our experiences, tie in very much.
Yeah. I guess maybe I should specify that we're trying to make sense out of suffering here, and that you're very right in that all of our experiences, teach us and we learn from. The emphasis today is on suffering, so I think that we make more sense out of suffering through the hurts and through what we learn through those. We cannot disconnect it. We can make sense out of suffering. We can interpret it in the best light for our own benefit, I think, through this attitude of humility. So what you're saying is true, and I think we're saying parallel truths in a sense.
I guess what I'm trying to say is some of the positives through some of the negatives, the positives that came of those negatives sort of helped to keep me going, so that it was a very important lesson that I learned, and that's why I chose to sort of interrupt you and just put in my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay. So theoreticians, those who theorize about suffering, don't necessarily score high on the humility-wisdom scale. Why would that be? Why would the theoreticians, those who write about suffering, the theorists, score high on the humility-wisdom scale? They haven't necessarily suffered. It's the experience of going down into Hades, of being at the end of your rope, of being out of your own resources, that really causes you to look up oftentimes. And so I think you have to suffer to even begin to pretend to know. You have to suffer to even begin to pretend to know.
Sylvia, I'd like to ask a procedural question, because I'm dying to ask a question that has nothing to do with would it be better to hold our questions? Would they be do they?
No, I don't think
Okay.
it would be a casual or
Okay.
small group.
Okay, all right. I wanted to go back even before Sally's question, where you were saying, because I just wondered if maybe we here today could miss something when you were talking about the knowledge and, that man has become the center of judgment. Is it your feeling that has creeped into what we call the evangelical church too?
Definitely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Okay.
You cannot divorce the area in which you live from your faith expression.
okay, I just,
It's just impossible to. It's impossible. We want to think we're objective, but we're very, very influenced by the media and the zeitgeist with
what's going on
what's
in the
going
world?
on out there. Exactly. Let's look at a few views of suffering. Here I'm proposing several. Suffering is punishment for sin. Well, in a strict sense, yeah, okay. Genesis 3, verses 13 to 19. Yeah, okay. We all suffer because of the fall, and suffering is a result of sin. I mean, didn't God tell Adam he'd have to till the soil, and Eve that she'd have childbirth pains? Yes, we know that in an ultimate sense. That's very true, and that suffering really wouldn't exist without the fall, without sin. Isn't that right? But a specific individual's experience with suffering may or may not be directly related or caused by sin. Sin is not always the precursor to suffering, even though we know that all suffering in the world, that suffering has entered the world because sin has entered the world. So 1 Corinthians 11:30 to 33, as well as James 5, in 1 Corinthians, you see that there's sickness and weakness in Corinth, and even death can exist because of sin. That's 1 Corinthians 11:30 to 33. And James 5 instructs elders to, before or conjointly with anointing with oil, to check out whether the individual who's praying for the elders to come for healing doesn't have unconfessed sin in their lives. And when I was at Weston and had my first bout with cancer, I certainly called the elders and had them lay hands on me. And one of the elders brought up the whole point. Of course, obviously, I had done some house cleaning before laying on hands, but that was a point that he had every right to pray through. That if there was unconfessed sin, that God would show it to me and that I would deal with it. So we know that suffering is not necessarily correlated with sin. And we also have the proof text of John 9 when I didn't write the reference down, but basically it's I think the disciples are asking Jesus why this man is blind. He's blind from birth, and Jesus says it's not because of the sin of his fathers or his sin, but that the works of God could be manifested in him. So we see there a really good proof text against that argument that suffering is always really sin. And any extreme views that relate suffering only to sin are going to result in inordinate and damaging guilt and self-recrimination and ultimately depression if you have that strict narrow view. So you have to be careful about guilt-tripping people and making them feel unduly concerned about that. Although an appropriate response whenever we suffer, and certainly a process that I've gone through, I think this is really important. Number one is that you do engage when you suffer in the exercise of self